Do we need to do a roll call for the Zoom meeting?
Yes.
Yes, and Jennifer will take the roll, but when you state your name, you're also required to state where you're calling in from.
Okay, Rachel, I'm sorry, Bernard.
Here, home in Royalton Township.
Gathamo?
Josh is here. I'm calling in from home in St. Joseph Township.
And Peter, tell me how to pronounce your last name.
Sure, it's Kolovis.
Kolovis.
In Greece, it's Kolovos. I'm present, calling in from my office in Benton Harbor, and due to COVID restrictions.
Right. And
Bill
Cole
Smith
is
from
not
Coloma.
here. Meeks,
Here in Bentard Township.
Quatrin,
Chris, you're on mute right now.
you're on mute.
All right. Christopher Quatrin calling in from the Berrien County Administration Building. And I have here with me my chief deputy, Kirsten Vandenberg. She's sitting in so she understands this. So if she ever has to sit in for me on the meeting, she can.
Excellent.
And Smith.
Here from Coloma.
All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 6 present.
Rachel, before we start, there's 2 agenda items that if there are no objections, we'd want to add to the agenda. The first is we have neglected to put public comments on the agenda, so we'll need to add that in there. And the second is that Jennifer reminded me yesterday we have to ratify an invoice that was paid a month or 2 ago without the board's presence. So we'll have public comments and then ratification of an invoice.
Perfect.
Okay.
Should we introduce the new members?
Yeah, I thought that would be worthwhile. Briefly, I won't say too much, but just to give some of the new members an impression of what the board membership looks like. We have 7 members of the board and 1 county commissioner who's a member ex officio, and that's Don Meeks. Don's position is a non-voting position. He's just here to basically report back to the Board of Commissioners on our activities. So we have 7 permanent members of this board. We currently have 1 vacancy, so we're looking to fill that. Unfortunately, as some of the members that have had longer terms remember, Connie Larson resigned or retired from the board after about 21 years. Glenn Zerler, unfortunately, about 14 months ago, passed away after 31 years on the board. And then very unfortunate, Dale Sorgett passed away this past fall, and he had about 36 years on the board. So it was a lot of longtime members that we've lost recently, but we have new members and we're happy for that. And the last thing I'll add before we'll go around and introduce everyone, the Drain Commissioner is a permanent member on the Board of Public Works by law. It's Christopher Quatrin. He's here. His assistant, Kirsten, fills in by statute. The Chief Deputy Drain Commissioner can also sit on the Board of Public Works in the absence of the Drain Commissioner. So that'll happen from time to time. Kirsten will be here with us when Christopher's not available. So with that, I thought we'd just kind of go around and introduce each other and reintroduce each other because it's been so long since we've seen each other. And I'll start. I'm Dan Fetty. I'm the director of the Community Development Department. I'm also the appointed director of the Board of Public Works.
Who's next?
Bill, you want to introduce yourself, Bill?
Yes, Bill Smith. It's been so long since we've had a meeting. I had hair before. That's gone.
Bill is also a former county commissioner and has been on the Board of Public Works both as a county commissioner and now as an appointed member by the county board. Peter, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, love to. My name is Peter Kolovis. I'm a real estate developer, primarily focused currently in downtown Benton Harbor. I live in the great state of Hager. Also, not only the great state of Hager resident, but also a trustee up there. So I'm happy to be on this board. Plan on learning quite a bit. I have 2 disclaimers, or I actually have 2 items I'd like to just set out right from the beginning. Number 1 is a disclaimer, and that is I ask questions like a 4-year-old which is why, and why. So just bear with me. And the second thing would be that there may be new processes that I would actually, before I do anything, I'd like to ask for clarification. So don't be annoyed with me early on. I'll get over it. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Don, you want to introduce yourself?
It's Don Meeks. I'm a retired contractor, and I've been on this board for, I think it's my third term now. But this board doesn't meet very often, but we don't have a whole lot to take care of. But I think what we do take care is pretty important. So like I said, I've been here, and also I was along with Bill when Bill was the county commissioner. That's my first term.
Yeah.
And Dan, you really did a good job introducing everybody. At the point, and I'd say I've been known Chris Contrum on this board. I've known him for many years.
Yeah.
So, like I say, this is this is kind of active. I think it's an important board. And like Dan say, I don't really here to vote. I'm just here to I guess I'm a tattletale to tell what's going on. Well, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Rachel?
My name is Rachel Bernard. I live in Royalton Township. My full-time job is at Rogers Foodland, and I'm also the newly elected clerk of Royalton Township
Congratulations.
in my spare time.
Nice.
Jennifer, do you want to introduce yourself? Because Jennifer is the one that you'll be communicating with quite frequently.
Jennifer Arndt. I have been staff at Berrien County for 16 years.
Jennifer, she's going to be embarrassed by me saying this, but Jennifer is kind of like the house mother for our department. She keeps us in line and reminds us where we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to be doing on a daily basis. So she's kind of the glue that holds everything together.
I love my people.
Christopher or Kirsten, you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Hey, well, I'm Christopher Quatrin. Actually, I was on the board prior to becoming drain commissioner,
Right. Yeah.
which I supported. It's really a neat board and does a lot of good things for our community. Although it's at a high level, I learned, but now as drain commissioner, it's the statutory. I sit on here, and Kirsten is the new chief deputy. I think it's going almost a year now. Almost a year, and you can introduce yourself.
Yeah. Kirsten Vandenberg, Chief Deputy Drain Commissioner. So in Christopher's absence, I will be here.
Thank you, guys. Josh?
Hey guys, my name's Josh Cathamal. I've been in the area in St. Joe for about 6 years now. We moved up from South Carolina. I'm originally from down south, but we moved up here to take a job at Cook Nuclear Plant. So currently in refueling outage management there. I get to plan all the outages that we do every 18 months there. So pretty good job. We really love the area, and I value my participation on this board. I think it does a lot of good things as well, as we said earlier. So thank you.
Thanks, Josh. All right, Rachel, do you want to ask for public comments? What we do on the Zoom meetings is these are being broadcast on YouTube, and Annette will ask for public comments, and then anyone that posts on the YouTube channel, she'll read the comments to us.
Okay. Yep. That sounds good.
Do we have anything in that?
No, I'm going to ask just for the heck of it, but it looks like I'm the only one watching, so I think you're good.
Still watch your language, just in case.
I'll be nice.
Well, if there aren't any, Rachel, you want to move to approval of the February 26 minutes?
Yes. From a whole year ago. The floor is open for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
You have a motion and support. Do we need to do a roll call for?
We have to roll call everything.
Question here. Should I abstain from this since I wasn't part of that?
Yeah, that would generally be the practice because you weren't a participant when the minutes.
I do that.
I'd have to abstain due because I missed the meeting.
No, Don, you can still do that.
Yeah, but I didn't think I could vote on that, but thank you. I will.
You can't make the motion to accept the minutes,
Okay.
but you can second, and you can also agree or disagree.
Okay.
Okay. Bernard,
Yes.
Cathamal,
Yes.
Meeks,
Yes.
Quatrin,
Yes.
Smith.
Yes,
We have 5 yeas and 1 abstention.
Right. Should we move on to correspondence?
We have no correspondence.
All right, old business. Should we?
Before that, we do have a bill that we need to ratify.
Okay.
The addition to the agenda that. So with no objection, I'll kind of go right into this. For the new members or those that weren't around when this happened, we issued a bond 2 years ago. I think we called it Bond 33, and that was for the Paw Paw Lake area wastewater treatment plant. It was to do a number of improvements and expand the capacity of that treatment plant and also pay off a pre-existing debt that the plant owed to Chemical Bank. The bond was about, I think it was $1.4 million, $1,420,000 in fact. About 520 was used to pay off the outstanding debt. Another 760 was used to pay for the improvements of the plant. We had about $50,000 in issuance costs, and then we were left with about $68,000 in unspent bond funds. We received an invoice from the plant, gosh, I think it was September, October, Jennifer, sometime in that area, where they had to purchase additional pumps that weren't part of the original project, but they're nonetheless eligible for payment by the bond funds. I think those pumps cost $93,000 or so. We had $68,500 remaining in the bond fund, so we did authorize the reimbursement of $68,500 against that cost directly to the plant, and that payment was made. Jennifer, I think it was October, wasn't it?
I have everything dated December 1st.
Okay, well, so we paid it by December. I think it came into us October. We paid it by December, but we reviewed it. The engineers reviewed it. It was eligible for reimbursement. So we did make that payment, and that closes out the bond fund for that project. So we spent it down to the very penny on that. So the general procedure for this would be to ratify that. I have the board ratify that payment just so there's a record of it.
Okay, I make a motion to ratify the payment for Paw Paw Lake Water Treatment Plant in the amount of $68,500.
support.
Whenever you're ready, Jennifer.
Bernard,
Yes.
Cathamal,
Yes.
Clovis,
Yes.
Meeks,
Yes.
Quatrin,
Yes.
Smith.
Yes,
You have 6 yeas.
All right, thank you. One additional thing I'll mention on this, we have revised the payment structures on this bond. This was a convoluted one because it was a bond that was sold on behalf of 4 separate communities in contract partnership with the County Board of Public Works, and that would be the City of Coloma, Coloma Township, City of Watervliet, and Watervliet Township. They are the 4 joint owners of that wastewater treatment plant. So we issued the bond on their behalf. And the challenge we ran into was, as we're making bond payments, we have to invoice each of those communities separately, collect the money from them, pool it together, make the bond payment. So we worked with them and talked to John Axe, our bond counsel, about this. And in the future, what we're doing now is just invoicing the wastewater treatment plant directly. They make the payment to us, and then that treatment plant goes out and does the sub invoicing to the local units. This kind of streamlines the process, so we're not sending out multiple different invoices. What we do as a backup is we send a notified invoice to the 4 communities just so they can record it on their books, so they know that there's a payment of debt that is being made on their behalf. But this has made it a lot easier. I think the last bond payment we made in the spring, or no, it was in the fall, pardon me, it went a lot smoother than trying to track down 4 different communities and get them to pay up. So that's just a revision to the practice, and we'll continue doing it that way for the next 18 years, I guess. So the only other thing I wanted to discuss with everyone, Rachel, if you're okay with this, is since we haven't met in a long time and we do have some new members that haven't been through the full process of building an infrastructure system from beginning to end, I wanted to just briefly go through the public act that authorizes the creation of this board, and then the procedures for borrowing money and building systems under that act. So this board is created under Public Act 185 of 1957. That's the County Board of Public Works Act. And in essence, what it says is that a county board can create this Board of Public Works and impanel it with permanent members. And the Board of Public Works can, on behalf of Berrien County, issue debt under contract with a local unit or multiple local units to finance and construct municipal infrastructure systems, including wastewater treatment systems, water treatment systems, storm sewer systems, and municipal landfill infrastructure systems. So we can do water, sewer, storm, and trash, basically. And what happens under Act 185 when we initiate a project is a local community sends us a request for initiation. It's reviewed by the board in consultation with engineers. If it's determined that the project is financeable and will generate income necessary to pay the debt on the project, this Board of Public Works passes a resolution asking for the initiation of the project. The Berrien County Board of Commissioners then passes a subsequent resolution, and that initiates the project. This board then goes and negotiates a contract with the local community, spelling out the terms under which we will sell a bond on their behalf and the terms under which we'll construct the project on their behalf. And then, of course, that contract is ratified by this board and the Board of Commissioners. Board of Commissioners then sells the bond, delivers the money to the Board of Public Works. We issue the construction contracts, build the project on behalf of the local community, pay the invoices on the construction, and then retain ownership of the system for the period of the bond duration, typically 10 to 20 years is what we sell a bond for. As the bondholders request payment on the bond, we invoice the local community for what we technically refer to as a lease payment, because they are leasing the infrastructure back from us during that period. The lease payment comes to us, we deposit it in the bond account, and then we pay the bondholders with that until the bond reaches maturity, at which point the project ownership reverts to the local community. So basically what we're doing is building systems on behalf of local communities with money we borrow, and then turning that system over to the local community for its lease management and payment of the bond in their terms. And the reason we do this is because the county, because of its stellar credit rating, tends to borrow money at a lower rate than most local communities can do. Additionally, unlike a local community, the bond sales that we engage in are not subject to public referendum, voter referendum. Whereas in a local community, if you were to issue bonds of this nature, you would be subject to a referendum from your community. So it is a way to kind of avoid that problem that comes up sometimes. The other thing is that many local communities that we work on behalf of don't have the capacity, the administrative capacity to manage large construction projects, or the financial capacity to manage the repayment of those projects. The final reason we do this is because we're capable of financing projects in partnership with multiple communities simultaneously that doesn't require the establishment of a public authority or something of that nature. The treatment plant project I just talked about is a good example of that. We have 4 communities participating in the project. They can basically channel their participation through our Board of Public Works without having to create a formal authority structure to do that. Another recent project that some board members will recall is the water sewer installation of Old US 31 that we did down in Orinoco Township in Berrien Springs. That was another joint project that was done with 2 communities without having to create a public authority for the purpose of that. So that's essentially why we do this. Lower interest rates, better bond terms, municipal or administrative capacity to actually construct the project and manage the financing on it. The avoidance of public referendum or voter referendum on a bond issue, and the ability to coordinate with multiple communities simultaneously to build projects. That's a real quick overview, especially for the new members who haven't been through this from beginning to end, but I'm happy to, yeah, Peter, if you have a question.
Sure, I actually have 3. Number one is, sounds like the county does take on risk. There's inherent risk in this process. So with risk, I would expect the county to make profit. Does the county make any money off of this? And how does it get reimbursed for any type of overhead or cost? And the third thing, does this also apply, you said stormwater, could we do drain projects as well?
Yeah, conceivably, we can do drain projects. There are other counties that actually do some drain projects through Act 185. It's possible to do because we can contract with any corporate municipal entity, and that's either a city, village, township. It could be a drainage district or any public authority that is a corporate entity. We're capable of issuing bond contracts with. To the first question, the county does not make money on this. We do cover our costs, though. So we charge administrative costs to the project that come out of the bond funds. And we have, I can actually forward to you our payment scale that we use. And it's based on the size of the project, the size of the bond and the complexity of the project. So we do cover our costs. I wouldn't say we make money, but we break even on the administrative time associated with it. In terms of the risk of repayment, there are multiple different ways that we mitigate the risk of repayment. These bonds are generally issued as what we call general obligation bonds. They're not revenue bonds. In other words, they're not dependent on the revenue of the system. They're dependent on the municipal taxing unit to pay the bond. So if the unit fails to make a bond payment, our contract allows us to take over that system and manage it at a profit until such point as it generates the revenue necessary to make the bond payment.
And bill it out. In other words, you can bill the users of it.
Exactly. We can go in and we can directly bill the users to make up for the lost payment that the community failed to make.
I understand.
The final thing that we have the ability to do is if the community doesn't pay the bond, we can go to court and force a millage to be placed on the tax rolls to pay the bond. In my time, we got close once. One time we had a bond with City of Benton Harbor that we came within the 11th hour of missing a single payment on. And we actually did front the money for them and they repaid us the next day. It was a technical default, but we didn't exercise any of our rights in the contract. But in 41 years, actually now 42 years, the Board of Public Works has never had a community miss a bond payment and it's never had to take enforcement action against the local community. And that's generally true throughout the state of Michigan. I'm only aware of one situation, and that was in Livingston County back in 2009, where there was a court enforcement because of a local community that failed to make bond payments. And it's because of a housing development that collapsed and there was no longer tax revenue to pay the bonds. So in the entire state of Michigan, I'm only aware of one situation where one of these bonds fell into such default that the courts had to get involved to provide a remedy for it. So it's a fairly secure way of financing these. And that's the reason that the interest rates are so low on them.
So the other risk I was referring to was performance risk in the construction project, whether it be with the contractors or the operation of the end product, but also potential conflict with something that didn't go right with the muni that you're doing the work for. So does that ever become a problem?
It's not uncommon for us to run into, difficulties in the construction of some of these projects, particularly depending on the complexity of the project. We pledge the infrastructure as part of the security on the bond, but the true security on the bond is the full faith and credit pledge of the county government and the local unit. So even if the project goes through modification or has to be redesigned or constructed differently as originally planned, the manipulation of that security is not what's critical to the bondholders. What's critical to the bondholders is the county's willingness to pay the bond and step in on behalf of the local community and make sure it gets paid.
Of course.
In terms of change order, we've been through this many times. We frequently get involved in a project only to find months into it that we have to modify the project, change if there's changing conditions. We've never had much difficulty, except we did have a situation related to the Benton Township Water Plant project years ago that ended up going to arbitration, and then the circuit court, and then the Court of Appeals. And we ended up, as some of the members will recall, we ended up losing that and having to pay the disputed change order on that project. But it's pretty common in a large construction project. Chris does them all the time with the drains too. You always run into change of conditions and change orders along the way, but that doesn't affect the security on the bond.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, Peter, just to kind of mention a little bit, we have the drainage districts usually bond out themselves, but there has been discussions, particularly the most current one with South Water Fleet, where we had multiple utilities being handled at the same time. And we had discussions, but it ended up that the drainage district ended up doing the bond and which could have been done through the public works. But there's other interesting things that happen, like Dan was saying, they take over the ownership of the utility till it's paid. That there's some issues with the drain, with the drain or drainage district that make that a little more difficult. Sometimes with the water, with the water or sewage. So there's some, I call it the legal side that makes it very different. But this board has a great role in really helping out the communities, being able to finance these utilities and build these projects for them. It's quite helps us grow as a community. So.
Yeah, and I think, just one final point I'd make, we have never gone through and really added up all of the work we've done. We've kind of, because it goes back 40 some years, but I believe the last time we tried to really get a handle on this, I think the Board of Public Works has financed well over 60 or 70 million dollars of infrastructure just in the last 2 decades. So you figure, if you go all the way back to the constitution of this board in the late 60s, I'm sure it's been well over $100 million of infrastructure throughout the county. So typically our work will involve smaller communities. Like I said, Village of Michiana would be one that we just did. That's a good example. We generally don't do projects for larger communities that can borrow on their own, or for larger public authorities that have revenue capacity to borrow. But again, the smaller communities, relatively simple engineering projects too, in the most case. I will tell you, we don't have anything on the horizon immediately this year. I've been in communication with a couple local units that, because of the extraordinarily low interest rates we're seeing right now, may kind of accelerate some maintenance plans that they had for their water and sewer systems, which would make sense. If there's long-term capital maintenance costs that they have and they want to do the work now, there's no better time to borrow the money than right now. Chris, you remember we refinanced some drain bonds last year and we ended up borrowing at a cost that was lower than the
1.5%, I think we're getting. And yeah, Peter, that's another thing I was going to mention is the faith and credit of the county is very important. They have, I can't remember, is it AA+ rating, Dan? It's really up there. It's I don't think any government could get much better than what we have. And that really helps out the community, particularly our drainage districts. We always ask for a faith and credit from the board because it'll drop a point. It could drop a point or even more off the interest rate. Because if not, with the faith and credit, we get the borrowing basically interest rate or the strength of the county. If I had go do it as its own district, which a district's like a municipality, so you can convert the same concept to one of the municipalities, is we'd have to bond it on our capabilities. In my case, they'd look at what kind of what the community's like, what the housing's like, and all those types of things, and they come up with that rate. So it varies. But for in the most part, when we get faith and credit from the county and at the drainage district level, which with municipalities the same, it's a huge savings on the interest through.
Does that run through the Public Works Board then, or does that go directly from Drain Commissioner to the Board of Commissioners?
It does, yeah, through the board, yeah, direct through the board. That's the districts. Remember, each district's like its own municipality, which is there's a slight difference. And why I keep talking about the stand, so Peter been involved in some drain projects, so he kind of sees the difference. So where it comes in is the Public Works actually owns the utility. So when they bond it out, they own it till the end of the bond is paid, then it turns back over to the municipality. So like the water lines, they own it until the bond's paid off. See, where the drainage district owns its utility, so we go bond that directly. And we have had some discussions, but we haven't had that one where everything clicks and makes it work, gives the best benefit to everybody involved. We had close on South Water Vliet. That was going there, and then we realized that there's some other means that gave us the better benefit.
Well, the final comment I'll make to the board, and this is probably the longest Public Works meeting we've had in years.
I can make it even longer. Don't worry.
It's my intention, my goal, to try to hit the streets a little bit and do some door knocking on some of these communities. I know that many of them just completed their SAW grants, which was their stormwater assessment grants that the state funded for the last 10 years. Those were used to set up capital maintenance plans for a lot of municipal infrastructure throughout the community. And I'm going to intend to go on a little bit of an advertising campaign here and talk to some of these communities and say, if you want to implement elements of that SAW project and you have to borrow to do it, now is the time to do it, because our interest rates are comparable to what the federal government is borrowing at right now.
And that's because as a community and economic development director, you want to see the best for the community. So you want to make sure that there's an awareness there, or is there some other benefit that I'm not seeing?
Well, I think the benefit, Peter, is if it's maintenance or reconstruction that needs to be done eventually anyway. Many of the infrastructure systems are approaching 50 or 60 years old.
Right.
And they become increasingly difficult to maintain if you're just trying to like deal with breaks and things like that.
Sure.
And if their SAW projects revealed long-term reconstruction or long-term maintenance that needs to be scheduled out over a capital improvement plan, 5-10-year improvement plan, the goal is, what I would suggest is borrow now at interest rates that are approximate to inflation. And you can get this construction done now in this environment and not wait, 10, 12 years down the road when we're undoubtedly going to see some higher interest rates, certainly rates exceeding inflation at some point. So there's no direct economic development impact to that. In other words, it's not going to immediately generate new development.
I understand.
But it will reduce the operating costs for these communities over time if they did these projects now. So that's what I'm encouraging.
Sure.
And I would encourage you to talk to your local communities as well and suggest that if there is, reconstruction or maintenance that needs to be done, we're here to help and we would love to do it.
Hey, Dan, when you go on that road trip, I'd love to go with you, knocking on those doors.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe the restaurants will be open by then too.
I can clean up. Don't worry.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's really all I have, unless anyone has any questions. I would like to, if possible, get in the habit of holding meetings, just even if it's only for 5 minutes every month, just so we're not losing touch with each other like we did over the last year. So I would anticipate that we'll certainly have a March meeting and an April meeting as well. Not that we will have any formal action to take, but just to make sure that we're getting FaceTime with each other.
And Dan, let me just add this: if you do that, the educational session is really good. So, you can bring up a topic and teach us about that. And if there's something else that you want to do relative to outreach, that's why we're here. I don't want to be a bump on a log. So it should be an effective board. Let's do something. If we don't have any projects, we got to do something else.
Understood. Thanks, Peter. The one other thing, Chris is aware of this. We're helping with a couple bond refundings right now. These are drain bonds, not Board of Public Works bonds, but our department is going to be helping with these refundings. We're going to have a very clear idea, I think, in the next 3 or 4 weeks, what the realistic interest rate or the borrowing rate is going to be for the next few months. So that's when we do the refunding, it's always a good benchmark to know what we can borrow at, But that's all I have. Thanks everyone for making the time today, and apologize for a 30-minute meeting, which far exceeds our.
Was it? Oh, it was.
Well, I want to say,
let you talk, Dan. That's the problem.
A new record.
this is the longest meeting I've ever been attended, and it's the most informative meeting that I think I've been at. So Peter, I'm kind of glad you're here, because now I know a little bit more than I knew before. So at the point, I'm kind of want to. Well, I want one thing to say. I've known Peter Clovis for quite a while too. We have drunk coffee and talked about some different issues. But like I say, Peter is really involved in the community, especially in Ben Harbor community. And I appreciate his effort at this point for what he's doing. So I just wanted to say that, Peter, just kind of say, welcome aboard.
Well,
And like I say, I'm a tattletale, so I'm going to tell on you.
Thank you, Commissioner Meeks. Appreciate the kind words.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Rachel, I don't have anything else, and unless there are questions, we can probably wrap it up.
All right, adjournment. Is there a motion for that?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
We have the motion and support, and then whenever you're ready, Jennifer.
I'm sorry, I missed who supported.
Gosh.
Kate Thimmel.
All right. So Bernard,
Yes.
Cathemel,
Yes.
Clovis,
Yes.
Meeks,
Yes.
Quatrin,
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
You have 6